I am Jolene Ferris, and I never imagined my phone would ring at the perfect moment, just as I was scraping burnt toast into the sink and wondering why the hell I kept showing up for people who would never do the same for me. But before I tell you how I lost everything in a fire and discovered that, to my own family, I was never a daughter, just an ATM. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. It was a Tuesday late spring, and the weather was suspiciously cheerful. Blue skies and a breeze that felt like a sales pitch. I had just signed a non-disclosure agreement with a global cosmetics brand that was about to make me rich, the kind of rich that makes your accountant nervous. 6 years of 20-hour days, red-eye flights, webinars at midnight, and more caffeine than FDA approval allows. And all of it behind closed doors. Because that's how my family preferred it. Don't bring work to the dinner table, Jolene. Not everyone wants to hear about digital stuff, Jolene. No one cares about analytics, Joe. They said it with smiles, the way someone tells you they don't like your haircut when they think they're being subtle. But subtle wasn't their strength, projection was. My mother, Doreen, once accused me of being addicted to screens because I brought my laptop to the hospital waiting room when Aunt Ruth had her hip replaced. What she didn't know, what none of them ever asked to know, was that I had 3 employees whose rent depended on me closing a campaign that afternoon. I didn't cry in that room, but I paid the hospital bill. Quietly, anonymously. I got used to being invisible. Useful, but invisible, like duct tape. My older brother Cal was the golden retriever of the family, lovable, reckless, and always somehow landing on his feet no matter how many bad checks or broken leases he left in his wake. That's just Cal, Mom would say, like Cal was weather. My little sister Marla got a standing ovation for getting her real estate license and a gift basket when she sold a condo to one of her exes. When I landed my first 6-figure client, I got silence. No, worse, I got questioned. Wait, but why would a toothpaste brand pay you that much? Are you sure it's legal? Must be nice to just work from home and make money off your phone. It was always like that. Every win I had was either misunderstood or rebranded as luck. And yet, every time someone needed something, rent for Cal's second DUI lawyer, money for Marla's new wellness space, Dad's bridge loan for his side hustle gone stale, I paid. Not because I wanted approval. That ship sailed before Obama's second term. I did it because that's what you do when you think love is earned in wire transfers. I was 17 when I first Googled how to make money online. It started with affiliate links and Pinterest boards, evolved into blog networks, then email funnels, and by 24, I was running 3 content agencies under shell companies while pretending to be between jobs just to avoid the questions at Thanksgiving. I'd built something real, but they never saw it. And now with a contract in my inbox that would give me equity in a global beauty brand's new product launch, something no woman under 35 had achieved on their roster, they still wouldn't know. Because I never told them. I knew they'd find a way to make it feel like a fluke. And still, every spring I showed up to the family dinner. It was a tradition born out of guilt and calendar alerts. Always at Cal's house, because he had the biggest one naturally. His girlfriend, Sky, yes, with an E, would serve charcuterie and misquote TED Talks, while my mother commented on how I looked less tired than usual. Marla would slide into the seat next to me and ask for money like she was asking for gum. Dad would mostly pretend I wasn't there. This year I promised myself I wouldn't go. I had a brand deck to revise and press kits to prep. But Mom texted me, "Everyone else is coming. Don't be dramatic." I almost said no, but somewhere between burnt toast and habit, I opened my closet and pulled out the only thing they ever noticed about me. A designer blazer they didn't know I got at a sample sale. I packed up the bottle of wine no one would thank me for, and drove out to Cal's house in Crestwood Ridge, a place where status is measured in granite countertops and unread bookshelves. I wish I could tell you I had a plan. I didn't. I just wanted to survive the evening. Crestwood Ridge was the kind of suburb that smelled like hedge trimmers and old money pretending to be new. Cal's house sat at the end of a circular drive that wrapped around a dried-up fountain and 3 cars he couldn't afford. The moment I stepped out of mine, an old Subaru I never bothered to upgrade, Sky opened the door like she'd been rehearsing for a reality show. "Joe, "You look so awake," she said, smiling too wide. That was her thing, complimenting you with a hint of concern. I smiled back like it didn't sting. You get good at that when your entire childhood is one long lesson in how to shrink. Inside, the house smelled like eucalyptus candles and tension. Cal had music playing low, some lo-fi playlist curated to feel effortless, and Doreen was already nursing a spritzer, flipping through a magazine she brought from home like she couldn't be bothered to engage. Marla was perched at the kitchen island, scrolling her phone and laughing at something that didn't involve me. Dad stood by the window with a whiskey glass, watching the backyard like it owed him money. No one looked up when I walked in. I'd like to say I expected that, but I hadn't grown that thick a skin. "Hey," I said, casual. "Traffic was brutal." No one asked about the traffic, or how I was, or what I'd been doing since last spring. Instead, Doreen gestured vaguely at the wine in my hand. "Put it on the table with the others." The others were from Marla's boyfriend, from Sky's boss, from Cal's lawyer friend. Mine was the only bottle without a tag, because I was the only one still pretending I didn't care if they knew I'd paid for most of this party. It had been like this for years. Not one big blowout, but a slow, persistent erosion of acknowledgement. I could trace it all the way back to high school, the moment I won a regional web design contest and no one showed up to the awards ceremony. Doreen had called it a bit niche, and Cal had a soccer game that apparently mattered more. Or the time I landed a full scholarship to a summer coding program, and my parents decided I should skip it to help watch Marla while they vacationed in Nova Scotia. When I protested, Doreen said, "Why would you want to be with strangers when your family's right here?" Right here, but never with me. That was the difference I learned early. Proximity didn't equal love. Still, I kept trying. I brought thoughtful gifts, I remembered birthdays, I bailed Cal out when he accidentally overdrew his startup account, twice. I covered Marla's car insurance for 3 years. I even paid off a second mortgage they took out and conveniently forgot to mention. No thank you cards, just silence. And when I finally got tired of hearing silence, I tried telling them the truth, once. It was after Christmas dinner 2 years ago. I'd had one too many glasses of wine and said, "You know, I pay your utility bills every month." They stared like I'd just told them I ran a drug cartel. Doreen clutched her pearls, literally. "Are you suggesting we're dependent on you?" "No," I said, suddenly sober. "I'm saying you are." They didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. And then Marla called needing money for a down payment, and everything went back to normal. Normal in our family meant pretending anything unpleasant had never happened. You learned to package achievements as anecdotes, to make your dreams small enough to fit inside a dinner conversation, to disappear unless someone needed a check. Which is exactly what dinner that night felt like. Another exercise in polite amnesia. Like none of the years had happened. Like I was just some distant relative who happened to be good with spreadsheets and credit limits. Cal asked me what I'd been up to lately, in the same tone you use for a dentist you forgot to tip. Marla mentioned she was pivoting her brand, whatever that meant. Sky gushed about an influencer retreat in Palm Springs. Nobody asked about my business. Nobody asked about the apartment I'd just renovated, or the speaking engagement I turned down in Paris. Or the client I'd landed whose product was set to launch in 20 countries. To them, I was still the girl in the background. Helpful, maybe, but not important. And as I watched Sky slice goat cheese onto artisanal crackers while Doreen hummed through her nose and Dad commented on the stock market like he had shares, I felt the familiar ache in my throat. That quiet, sharp sting that reminded me I was still, after all these years, trying to earn a seat at a table I'd already paid for. I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't want, and smiled like it didn't matter. But something in me had already started to crack. It started in a Starbucks bathroom. That sounds less glamorous than I wish it did, but that's the truth. I was 24, newly unemployed after my agency contract got cut, and sitting on the cold tile floor with my laptop balanced on my knees because the cafe Wi-Fi didn't reach the back tables. I had exactly $312 in my checking account and a suitcase full of unpaid internships, polite rejection emails, and a marketing degree no one cared about. I wasn't looking to build an empire. I was looking to survive. There was this blog, run by a single mom who taught people how to make passive income through Pinterest. I read her posts like they were sacred texts. Then I borrowed a cracked iPhone from a friend, signed up for 5 free tools, and started creating. First, it was pins. Then, simple landing pages. I taught myself how to write email copy that didn't sound like a robot wrote it. I figured out A/B testing on weekends and learned SEO like it was a second language. Every failure became a roadmap. Every bounce rate a teacher. By the time I turned 25, I had 3 clients, small brands run by Etsy sellers who needed help turning traffic into sales. I worked from cafes and borrowed bedrooms, teaching myself everything from scratch, while watching my family post wine and brunch selfies like none of us were barely scraping by. When Cal called that year asking for just a little help to get his crypto project off the ground, I sent him $3,000 from my first real invoice. He said thanks. Never paid me back. Marla asked for a mini loan to fix her car. I sent it. She said she'd Venmo me next week. That was 3 years ago. I didn't tell them where the money came from. Maybe I thought if they didn't know, they wouldn't ruin it. That anonymity let me grow. By 26, I was running multiple campaigns for mid-tier clients. By 27, I was building a boutique agency that specialized in digital product launches for women-led brands. I hired 2 freelancers, then a project manager, then a full team of 6, all remote. I called it North Hex because it sounded cool, and no one would guess it was founded by a woman in a borrowed hoodie eating dollar ramen. We launched niche campaigns that went viral on TikTok, grew email lists by tens of thousands, turned side hustles into 6-figure businesses. My favorite client sold plant-based fertility supplements and used our strategy to get featured in Healthline and go from $400 month to $250,000 quarter. Still, I said nothing to my family, because every time I hinted at success, I got comments like, "Must be nice not to have a real boss. Oh, so you're like an influencer now? Sounds complicated. You ever think about getting a steady job?" They didn't understand it, and worse, they didn't want to understand it. They preferred me useful but small. So I became their silent provider. When Dad forgot to pay the property tax one year, I wired it in secret. When Cal's business partner sued him for breach of contract, I covered the retainer. I even paid off the last of Marla's student loans because she was tired of getting reminder emails. They had no idea that while they were cosplaying middle-class comfort, I was hemorrhaging my savings to keep their lives stitched together. I kept a spreadsheet. It wasn't out of bitterness, not at first, it was to stay sane. I titled it The Invisible Ledger. It had 5 tabs: rent, utilities, legal, loans, misc. I updated it every Sunday with the same devotion other people used for prayer. And then came the big pitch. A beauty tech startup, Sola, found me through a referral and asked me to handle their influencer rollout. I studied their brand, rewrote their content calendar, and brought in a 300% ROI on their first quarter. They offered me a permanent contract, stock options, and an advisory seat. It was the kind of moment you dream about, the kind that erases years of hustle with one line in a contract. I almost told my family. But then I remembered what happened when I landed my first corporate client, and Doreen called it a lucky fluke. Or when I bought my first apartment, and Cal asked if I was being smart with my taxes. So I stayed quiet. The apartment was mine, the money was real, and I was finally ready to stop being the family fixer. I told my assistant to clear my schedule for one weekend. I was going to show up to dinner, eat the stale crackers, smile through the fake laughs, and finally say no. No more loans, no more quiet rescues, no more pretending they hadn't slowly bled me dry with thankless smiles. I had an empire now, and I was done being invisible. The morning of the dinner, I woke up before sunrise, restless, wired. I padded barefoot through my apartment, a place that finally felt like mine after years of cramped co-living and secondhand everything. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast soft orange shadows across my white oak floors, and the espresso machine I'd gifted myself for hitting my first $1 million quarter hissed softly in the kitchen. I should have felt powerful. I should have been celebrated. Instead, I felt a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. The same one I used to get before parent-teacher nights, when I'd quietly hope no one would mention I existed. The same one I carried through every family event where my name was the last to be remembered, the first to be dismissed. The only difference this time? I had a secret worth keeping. By noon I was triple-checking pitch decks for Sola's upcoming investor meeting. They wanted me in LA the following week, all expenses paid. They were even flying in a photographer for updated press assets. They were going to announce my role publicly. That one detail made my throat tighten with something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't comfort either. If they Googled me now, my family would know. If they looked closely enough, they'd see who had been signing their lifelines all these years. But they wouldn't. They never looked at me long enough to see anything that wasn't immediately about them. I stared at my closet longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't know what to wear, but because I knew they'd notice no matter what I chose. If I looked too nice, they'd call it showing off. If I looked tired, they'd ask if things weren't going well lately. I settled on neutral. Black slacks, cream blouse, gold hoops, professional but boring, palatable. I packed the wine, the good kind, because some bad habits die hard. Before I left, I stood in my living room and stared at the wall I'd painted sage green just last month. My favorite color? My choice. My space. There were 3 framed photos on the console table. My team during a launch party, my best friend Darcy and I at the beach, and one of just me, standing on the rooftop in Tokyo during a solo business trip, arms raised like I was catching the sky. No family photos. Not out of spite, just honesty. The drive to Cal's house was a familiar one, past the old bakery that had turned into a yoga studio, past the rows of identical houses with the same leased SUVs out front. Cal had chosen Crestwood Ridge because it looked successful. I knew because he'd said those exact words when he bought it, with money borrowed from a silent partner. I was that partner. Silent, as always. Sky answered the door again, this time wearing a white dress that looked more bridal than casual. "Joe," she chirped, "so glad you made it. Everyone's here." Of course they were. They always were. And I always came last. Inside, the living room was loud with performative laughter. Doreen was wearing one of her statement necklaces that looked like it came with its own shipping container. Marla's hair was shorter, blunt bob, platinum. Dad was swirling ice in his glass like he was auditioning for a whiskey ad. Cal spotted me and gave me the kind of hug that's all shoulders. "Hey Jojo, looking sharp." Then he leaned in. "You still doing that, campaign stuff?" I smiled. "Yeah, something like that." He nodded like he'd just asked about the weather, then turned back to his friends who were laughing about something that involved golf and cryptocurrency. Classic. I placed the wine on the kitchen counter next to 3 others, 2 unopened, 1 half drunk. Sky clinked glasses with Marla and whispered something that made them both giggle. Doreen hadn't looked up from her phone. I exhaled slowly. Just one dinner. I told myself. Just get through it. Then I saw something that made me pause. Cal had a stack of bills and envelopes tucked under a coaster on the side table. I caught a glimpse of red ink, overdue notices. Mortgage? Utilities? Old me would have quietly slipped out my phone and scheduled a payment. But old me wasn't here tonight. Not really. Dinner was being plated. Sky's idea of fine dining, which included quinoa salad with edible flowers and a main course that looked like something from a vegan cooking show with too many filters. I sat at the far end of the table. No one protested. I watched my family talk, so loudly, so confidently, as if they hadn't lived off my money for 6 years. As if I hadn't sacrificed relationships, vacations, weekends, and sanity to keep the lights on for them. As if I didn't exist. And yet, I did. Stronger, sharper. Tired of pretending. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to say. But I knew this. Tonight would be the last time I showed up invisible. The first jab came before I even picked up my fork. "So, Jolene," Doreen began, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a cloth napkin like she was on some talk show panel, "are you still doing that thing with emails?" Sky chuckled. "Yeah, like newsletters, right? I get those from my yoga studio, they're cute." Marla raised a brow. "Wait, is it like marketing or like influencer stuff? Because I saw this girl on TikTok who said she makes 5 figures a month just posting outfits. You should try that." I bit into my salad and smiled like it didn't feel like 1,000 paper cuts. It's digital brand strategy mostly. Product launches, scalable funnels, paid campaigns. Blank stares. Cal coughed into his drink. "Still sounds like made-up money to me." Doreen waved a hand. "As long as it's keeping you busy, I suppose that's what matters. You always did need a project. Sky nodded sympathetically. Idle hands, right? I set my fork down. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they looked at me. Like I was the family dog who'd learned a neat trick. Like I was cute, but ultimately disposable. Like I hadn't paid for every goddamn mortgage buffer and dental emergency for the past half-decade. And still, I tried to be gracious. How's the new listing going, Marla? I asked. She lit up. Oh my god, it's this stunning mid-century place with floor-to-ceiling windows. I haven't sold it yet, but I've already posted 3 walkthroughs on my Insta. Got like 8,000 views. Nice, I said. Views are a good start. She tilted her head. Yeah, I mean it's not profit though, but I'm building momentum, I nodded. But something in her tone twisted. She wasn't sharing with pride, she was posturing. For me. Like she wanted me to validate her hustle, even while discrediting mine. Dad chimed in with his usual, what matters is doing something real, something tangible. That's why I liked construction. When you build a house, you can point to it and say, I made that. Doreen gave him an approving pat on the shoulder, as if he'd just shared a parable. Exactly. This generation's too obsessed with screens, everything's online and imaginary. I took a sip of wine. Imaginary. Sure, like the wire transfer I made to cover the tax lien on this very house. Like the LLC paperwork I filed for Cal when his last idea fell apart. Like the invoices I paid under fake names so their egos could stay intact. Sky leaned toward me, all earnest concern. So if the economy tanks or like, the internet dies or something, what happens to your job? I blinked. Then I start a new one, probably before dessert. That got a laugh from someone. Marla, maybe. But it wasn't kind. It was the laugh of people who think you're clever, not competent. The conversation moved on without me. Cal bragged about a new investment opportunity with a guy from the gym. Marla shared a story about a client who ghosted her after she bought them smoothies. Sky asked Doreen for skincare tips, and Doreen launched into a monologue about collagen and clean living, never once mentioning the gift cards I'd sent her every birthday to fund that habit. I faded into the background again. Like furniture. Like wall art. Until Cal dropped his fork and casually said, Oh, by the way, Dad and I talked, and we think it's time we streamline some things. You don't need to keep covering the family plan anymore. We're good now. The room went silent. I looked up, unsure I'd heard right. Excuse me? Marla shrugged. Yeah, we just figured we've leaned on you enough. Time to let you breathe. Let me breathe? Doreen nodded solemnly like this was a mercy. We're simplifying, cutting unnecessary ties. We've realized we need to take responsibility for our own paths. Sky added, You've got your thing, we've got ours. I stared at them. At this table full of people who had taken everything from me, time, money, energy, and were now dressing up rejection as generosity. Cal grinned. No hard feelings, right? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. It was like my brain short-circuited, trying to compute the absurdity of being fired from a job I was never hired for. They thought they were letting me go. As if I hadn't been holding the roof up with my bare hands for 6 years while they played pretend. And the worst part, they truly believed this was kindness, that cutting me off was their way of freeing me. I felt my heart beat in my temples. A ringing started in my ears. I almost stood up, almost told them everything. The money, the sacrifices, the nights I worked through pneumonia to pay off Marla's medical debt she never even thanked me for. But I didn't, because just then, my phone buzzed on the table. And when I turned it over, I saw a number I didn't recognize. A New York area code. One I had hoped to hear from. I tapped it open, and in 10 seconds, everything changed. The room blurred as I stared at the screen. I stood, quietly, stepping out of the dining room before anyone could follow or notice. In the hallway, half shielded by a faded family photo where I stood 3 inches out of frame, I answered the call. Jolene Ferris? A clipped, efficient voice said. Yes, speaking. This is Lorna Edgewater, VP of Operations at Sola. I hate to do this over the phone, but I wanted you to hear it directly. There's been a fire. Your server building downtown, it's gone. Complete loss. I stopped breathing. Gone? She kept talking. Our team just got word from emergency services. Everyone's safe, no injuries, but the fire spread fast. You may want to contact your backup provider. If you had physical equipment or hard drives stored there. I did. I said it quietly, eyes fixed on the floorboards. That building wasn't just my server farm. It held prototypes, legal docs, unreleased campaign data, brand collateral, years of work. Redundant backups? Sure, but nothing replaces momentum. Nothing replaces a launch day perfectly aligned with 15 influencers, 3 ad networks, and 1 international press release. The plan was gone. The leverage, gone. I hung up before she could say more. I didn't have it in me to say thank you. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. My throat burned, not from sadness, but the slow dawning awareness that everything I'd built was unraveling in real time. And I was surrounded by the last people on earth I wanted to witness it. I walked back into the dining room. My hands were shaking. They had already moved on to dessert, some whipped chia seed nonsense Sky had learned on Instagram. Marla was mid-sentence about manifesting a new apartment when she paused and looked up. "You okay?" she asked, blinking. "You look pale." I sat down, numb, my phone still face down. "I'm fine," I said, "just a call from work." Doreen didn't even look up. "Can't it wait? You're always working, Jolene. No wonder you're so tense all the time." That was it. Something in me broke, not like a crack, like a shatter. I looked at them, really looked at them. Cal, wiping sugar off his mouth with a receipt. Marla, curling her hair with one finger like she wasn't $12,000 in debt to me. Dad, checking his watch for a stock that didn't exist in his portfolio. Doreen, sipping water like she was too holy for tap. They'd never asked. Never wanted to know. And now, even when I was breaking, they still didn't see me. I cleared my throat. "You know what? Let me save you the trouble." They all turned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Cal asked. "You're cutting me off?" I said, voice calm. "No more family plan? No more burdens on Jolene?" Doreen raised an eyebrow. "That's not what we meant." "No," I said, nodding. "It's okay, because it ends tonight." Sky blinked. "Wait, what ends?" "I'm done," I said. "Done being your ATM. Done being your silent investor. Done being the person you call for last-minute money and zero accountability." Dad stiffened. "Now hang on." "No," I said, "let's talk math, shall we? Cal, I paid off your DUI lawyer, your first failed app, and your gym franchise. Marla, I covered your car repairs, your medical bills, and your rent for 2 years. And Mom, that Hawaii trip? That wasn't Dad's work bonus. That was me. I paid for your beachfront villa because I thought, maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, you'd finally see me." No one breathed. I stood. The fire? That call I just got? My entire company infrastructure just went up in flames. And all I could think was how I didn't want to fall apart here, in front of the people who never gave me anything but receipts disguised as affection. Marla opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "I don't need sympathy. I don't need validation. I need distance." I picked up my coat and bag, walked toward the door. Cal stood halfway. "Joe, we didn't know." "That's the point," I said, turning back. "You never asked." I didn't slam the door, I didn't cry, I just walked out, heels echoing against polished hardwood, and felt, finally, like I wasn't the broken one. They were, and I wasn't carrying them anymore. The night air hit me like a baptism. Cold, crisp, and too honest to ignore. I didn't get in my car right away. I just stood there in the driveway, staring at the crescent moon hanging above Crestwood Ridge like it was watching everything unfold with quiet amusement. I could still hear laughter from inside the house, muffled now. Someone turned the music back on, a beat, a bass line, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't happened. My phone buzzed again, a second call. This time, it was Darcy. I answered instantly. "Joe? I just saw the fire on the news," she said breathlessly. "Please tell me you weren't in the building." "I wasn't," I said, voice low. "But all our physical servers were, and our original product footage and the prototype equipment, gone." A beat of silence. Jesus. "I'm okay," I added quickly, even though I wasn't sure that was true. "But I was at dinner, with them. They cut me off tonight, told me I didn't need to cover anything anymore, like they were doing me a favor." Darcy didn't respond right away. Then gently, "You're coming here, now." "Darcy. Jolene, don't argue, the team's here. Jared brought pie, our backup servers are still intact, and your second round with Sola, it's still on. They've already messaged asking if we want to relocate the partnership. You haven't lost everything, just the shell." I swallowed hard. "You sure?" "Of course I'm sure," she said. "And Joe, you're not alone, you never were." That did it. My knees didn't buckle, but my eyes stung like hell. Not from grief, from the pure aching relief of being seen. Darcy wasn't my blood, Neither was Jared or Fiona or any of the team members who showed up to work sick, exhausted, half-broken but full of belief. But they were mine, chosen, earned, and loyal, not because they had to be, but because I'd built something worth standing in the fire for. I hung up, climbed into my car, and drove, not back to the apartment, not to clean up the mess. I drove straight to Darcy's. The loft was already lit when I pulled up. Inside, laughter spilled through open windows. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't have a sharp edge. Darcy answered the door in pajama pants and a NASA sweatshirt. Jared waved from the kitchen. Fiona looked up from the couch where she was typing furiously with headphones around her neck. "Family meeting," Darcy said, grabbing my hand and pulling me in. No judgment, no performance, no resentment that I'd had a breakdown in the middle of $1 million week. Just love, and support, and space to breathe. We spent the night on laptops reviewing what we still had. The backup servers had held. A month-old product video could be salvaged and reshot. I had everything stored redundantly in cloud archives, even if the hardware was toast. Fiona offered to fly out to Tokyo to redo the launch shoot. Jared volunteered to cover client calls for the next 2 days so I could rest. Darcy? She just kept bringing me tea. At some point around 2 a.m., someone put on Beyoncé and we danced like idiots, all elbows and laughter and the kind of joyful noise my childhood home had never once known. That night, I remembered what real love looks like. It looks like people who show up with pie when everything burns down. It looks like teammates who cancel their weekend plans to rebuild with you from scratch. It looks like a living room where you can fall asleep on a beanbag chair knowing someone will throw a blanket over you without asking why you're crying. My real family wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I built. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through Darcy's loft windows and the smell of eggs and coffee drifting from the kitchen. My back ached from the beanbag, but I didn't care. I hadn't slept that deeply in years. There was a calm in my chest, like the storm had passed, and for the first time, I wasn't bracing for another. Darcy slid a mug into my hands and sat beside me, cross-legged on the floor. "You gonna call them?" I stared into the coffee. "I don't think I need to." "Good," she said, "because they don't deserve even that." Still, I knew I had one more thing to do. I didn't want to vanish quietly. Not this time. Not after everything. I wanted to choose the ending. So I wrote an email. Subject line, foreclosure. No dramatics, no begging for recognition, just a brief sharp summary of the past 6 years in numbers. $184,000 in housing support, $67,500 in medical and legal expenses, $22,300 in birthday gifts, emergency funds, loans that were never paid. Total, $273,800, invested in a family who never saw me beyond a balance sheet. I added one final paragraph. "You cut me off thinking you were taking something away, but what you never realized is I stopped needing you a long time ago. I was giving. You were taking. We are no longer in business. I wish you clarity, someday." Then I clicked send, blocked every number, and deleted the family chat for good. An hour later, I got a call from Sola's CEO. She'd heard about the fire, read my recovery proposal, and told me point blank, "Most people would have folded. You rebuilt overnight. That's the person I want on our board." I didn't cry until after the call ended. Not because of the opportunity, but because I finally believed that someone had seen me without needing me to set myself on fire first. Later that day, my inbox lit up with the press release. I was being announced as Sola's new chief brand strategist. My name, in print, my title, my story. And this time, I didn't hide it. Darcy threw a "you survived the fire" party that night. The cake said rebuilt, not broken. I let myself laugh. I even danced, really danced, like I hadn't in years. And just before midnight, I posted something I never thought I would. On my main account, under my real name. 6 years ago I was building a company out of coffee shops while funding my family's version of reality. Last week, I lost everything in a fire. Except myself. Today I joined the board of a global beauty brand. Rebuilding isn't weakness, it's power. Here's to choosing your own ending. Within minutes the comments flooded in. Clients, colleagues, friends from college, strangers, all cheering, all rooting for me, all reminding me that I was never invisible, I'd just been surrounded by the wrong audience. And somewhere deep in the threads, tucked between emojis and applause, was the simplest line of all. This is what real family looks like. It's funny how quiet everything gets once the wrong people are out of your life. Not silent, just peaceful. The kind of quiet that feels earned. A week after the dinner, I sat in the back garden of Darcy's loft, barefoot on the patio, watching her water succulents while Jared grilled chicken skewers and Fiona practiced a pitch aloud to her reflection in the sliding glass door. Someone had brought a Bluetooth speaker. Fleetwood Mac played low in the background. Nothing fancy. Just safe. I'd never had a moment like that with my biological family. Not once. Not during birthdays, not during holidays, certainly not during those long years I paid for everyone else's mess. With them there was always an undercurrent, of expectation, of criticism, of that needling sense that I had to justify my seat at the table. But here, I was just Jolene, not a savior, not a resource, just me. Darcy handed me a drink and sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "For the first time in years I actually think I am," she smiled. "You know, I've watched you bend yourself into pieces for people who only ever applauded the fragments, but what you did last week, that wasn't destruction, that was freedom." I looked at her, then toward the others, and realized what I had been too stubborn, or maybe too desperate to admit. They were my real family. Not by blood, but by choice, by truth, by presence. Jared came over with a plate of food. "You know, if your ex-family ever comes crawling back, I hope you make them fill out an application." "With a 2-year waiting period," Fiona chimed in, holding up a mock clipboard. We laughed, not the forced kind that lives between clenched teeth and polite lies. Real laughter. The kind that fills your lungs like oxygen you forgot you were missing. That night, I sat with Fiona as we reviewed the upcoming relaunch schedule. Our backups were stable. The damage was inconvenient but not fatal. With my name now publicly tied to Sola, offers were already flooding in. We'd have more clients than we could handle by next quarter. But that wasn't the win I cared about anymore. The real win was smaller, softer. It was waking up to texts from my team saying we've got you. It was dinner in sweats and no makeup with people who respected silence. It was being surrounded by allies who didn't ask for a piece of me just because I was generous enough to give. I got a message from Marla that same night. Just a single line. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of peace. She wanted access again, probably because she saw the press, probably because her lease was up, but I wasn't a revolving door anymore. That part of me had closed, and the lock clicked gently. Instead, I forwarded her message to a folder I'd labeled detached. Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and leaned back into the conversation swirling around me, about nothing and everything. About how Darcy once dated a guy who thought chia seeds were fish eggs. About how Fiona's mother still sends her newspaper clippings in the mail. About how Jared once accidentally pitched a brand campaign to the wrong CEO and landed the client anyway. I laughed until my ribs hurt. This was my chosen family, my real home. No blood ties, no manipulation, just presence, loyalty, love. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't proving myself. I was simply allowed to be. The first message from my father came 2 days later, a simple, "Can we talk? Your mother's worried." I stared at it for a long time, not because I was tempted, those days were behind me, but because I finally saw it for what it was, a tactic, not an apology. Not accountability, just the next move in a lifelong pattern of emotional IOUs disguised as concern. I deleted it. Then I changed my number. Not just for them, for me. It wasn't revenge. It was hygiene, emotional hygiene. I was cleaning out the rot. I created new rules, not boundaries, walls with gates, and the only people allowed in were the ones who showed up with respect and consistency. Not guilt. Not need. Not some fake story about how they raised me. Darcy helped me write the new onboarding guide for North Hex. Not just for clients, but for team culture. No more martyrdom. No more burnout masquerading as loyalty. We implemented new mental health support systems, flexible launch schedules, even digital quiet weeks where no one had to be constantly plugged in. Because I knew now, being essential doesn't mean being exhausted. I also started therapy again. This time not to fix myself, but to unlearn the idea that love had to be bought. My therapist, Eliza, said something during our second session that landed like a hammer wrapped in silk. Your family didn't raise you. They trained you. And you broke the conditioning. That stuck with me. I'd been conditioned to apologize for taking up space, to work twice as hard for half the attention, to smile through betrayal and call it grace. No more. One night I sat alone on my apartment balcony, my newly painted, sage-green walls behind me, and watched the city lights blink like soft reminders of how much choice I had now. The fire had taken my things, but not my mind, not my value, not the truth of what I'd built. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap kind I used to buy to save money for Marla's debt, but something crisp and bright and mine, and I wrote myself a letter. Just one line. You don't owe anyone the ruin of yourself just to prove you're worth loving. I folded it and taped it to my fridge, because I never wanted to forget again. I no longer chased their approval, their silence, or their chaos. If they wanted to spiral into another financial mess, they could do it without my bank account cushioning the fall. If they wanted to paint me as cold or ungrateful, let them. I wasn't responsible for their delusions anymore. A week later, I received a certified letter in the mail. Doreen's handwriting, overly neat, as if packaging control in cursive. I didn't open it. I slid it into the back of a drawer labeled unsentimental. Let them wonder what I knew. Let them spiral in the silence I once filled with explanations and emergency wires. Let them figure out who they are when I'm no longer the scaffolding holding up the fantasy, because I had built my fortress. Not of walls, but of clarity. A life full of people who saw me before I collapsed. A company that flourished because I led from a place of wholeness, not self-erasure. A version of Jolene who didn't answer panic texts with cash and shame. I still had hard days. Of course I did. Sometimes I missed the idea of family, birthday cards with glitter, Thanksgiving arguments that end in hugs, someone to call when you don't know if your cough is serious. But the difference now? I didn't pretend. I didn't chase shadows. I invested in people who invested back. And as the weeks passed, I realized something even more powerful than rejection or revenge. I didn't need to burn bridges. Because the fire had already done its job, and I'd walked away with the blueprint for something better. The day my story ran in Fast Company, I didn't even know it was coming out. Darcy had set it up as a surprise, pitched it quietly to a journalist friend, using the angle of resilience after catastrophe. Self-made strategist loses company in fire, rebuilds in 72 hours, lands board seat at global brand. I opened the article at 6:47 a.m. over coffee and oatmeal, expecting a short blurb, but it was a full spread. Headline: She was her family's safety net for 6 years, then she chose herself. My name, my full name, sat in bold under a pull quote. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop showing up for people who only remember you when they need to. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, I just smiled and exhaled, long and slow, like I was finally breathing air that didn't belong to anyone else. The article spread fast. Messages poured in from women I didn't know, some running startups from basements, others teaching kids during the day while building digital brands at night. They all said the same thing: thank you for showing me I'm not alone. That's when it hit me. All those years, I'd been the family's silent support beam, hiding behind invoices and gift cards. I had been investing in the wrong legacy. I'd built something powerful, but it had no name. Now, it would. Within the month, I launched the Ledger project, named after that dusty spreadsheet that once documented every dollar my family had quietly bled from me. But this time, Ledger meant something different. It was a platform for financial literacy and digital empowerment for women rebuilding their lives after family trauma, offering grants, courses, legal aid, and mentorship. No judgment, no shame, just tools. Hope. A community. We ran our first pilot program within 45 days. By month 3, we had over 10,000 members. I gave talks, I partnered with banks. I stood in rooms I used to only dream about and said things I once whispered in therapy. Your worth is not proportional to your sacrifice. You don't have to earn your seat with silence. You are allowed to walk away. And still, I kept North Hex thriving. But now, I wasn't doing it from behind a curtain. I was the face, the name, the founder. I stopped softening my wins to make others comfortable. I stopped deleting client screenshots from my personal phone in case someone snooped. I stopped pretending my success was a fluke. It was earned. It had always been earned. When a podcast host asked me if I ever felt regret about cutting my family off, I paused for the first time in a long time. And I said no. I feel grief. But not regret. I grieve the family I thought I had. I grieve the younger version of me who tried so hard to belong. But I don't regret choosing peace. I don't regret choosing me. Sometimes letting go is the real inheritance. And as I stood on stage in front of 200 women holding notebooks and open hearts, I said it out loud. You don't have to prove yourself to people who've decided not to see you. Build anyway. Heal anyway. Walk anyway. It was never about revenge, it was always about reclamation. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister or an accidental benefactor with a PayPal account and too much guilt. I was Jolene Ferris, a strategist, a builder, a damn good woman, and finally my name meant something on my own terms. It wasn't a dramatic sunrise or a thunderstorm epiphany, it happened on a Tuesday. Just a Tuesday. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the new one I built myself, well, assembled, but it felt like building. The light hit the room just right, the sage walls, the framed quote Darcy gave me, "What you allow is what will continue." My fridge still had the note I wrote to myself months ago, curling slightly at the edges. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. My inbox was full. My phone buzzed with texts. Clients, collaborators, invites, praise, but I let it all sit. Because I had nowhere to be but here, inside the life I'd finally claimed as my own. And then it struck me. How quiet my mind had become. No bargaining with ghosts, no imaginary arguments I never won, no financial spreadsheets underpinned by anxiety and obligation. Just breath. And coffee. And peace. I walked barefoot to the balcony, sat on the cushioned chair Darcy had insisted I buy, and watched two pigeons fight over a croissant someone had dropped on the sidewalk below. I laughed out loud. For no reason. It had taken nearly a decade of proving, providing, pushing, and when everything burned, literally, I didn't just lose my servers, I lost the illusion that if I gave enough I'd finally be invited inside. But what they never knew, what I had forgotten, was that I didn't need the invitation. I'd built my own house. And it never needed their name on the deed. There's a strange calm that comes from no longer needing anything from people who once held all your strings. Not their money, not their approval, not even their apology. Some things remain unsaid, and some things are better that way, they've gone quiet now. A final attempt to regain power by withholding contact, as if I hadn't already burned that bridge and built a kingdom on the ash. Let them sit in their silence. I'm not listening anymore, because I'm here now, fully. In my name, in my work, in my story, and I didn't just survive it, I authored it.